How can a God send anyone to hell? What the church actually teaches. A loving God who tortures people forever for finite mistakes. That's the version of hell most people have in their heads. And if it were the Catholic teaching, the objection would be devastating. It isn't the teaching. Not because the church softened it, but because it was never what was said. Today, I want to lay out what the church actually holds, where the real difficulty still sits, and why this matters for anyone who could be carrying fear about it. So let's jump into this carefully. My name is Jonathan Roberts. I'm a Catholic apologist. Last time we spoke on moral objection from the Old Testament. This is the other half of that objection, and for a lot of people, it's the bigger one. So two things before we start. First, I'm going to distinguish carefully between what the church formally teaches and what's common opinion and what's speculation. Those get blended together consistently, usually by people arguing on either side. And the blending is where most of the confusion comes from. Second, if you're watching this because you're personally afraid, hold on until the end. There's something in the final section for you specifically. So, here's the objection at full strength. No finite crime deserves infinite punishment. A human life is short. Whatever wrongs a person commits in 70 or 80 years, they're bounded. Punishment without end is out of proportion completely. And it gets sharper. If God is all powerful, he chose to create people, he knew we would end up there. If he's all loving, he presumably doesn't want that. So either he couldn't prevent it or he didn't want it badly enough. Neither option is looking good. That's the argument. It's serious, and answering it requires actually looking at what's being claimed. Here's the core of it, and it's not what most people expect. The Catechism describes hell primarily as a state of definitive self-exclusion from communion with God. The language is deliberate. Self-exclusion, not a sentence handed down by an angry judge, but a person's own final refusal, which God respects. And the Catechism is explicit that God predestines no one to hell. Nobody is created for it. Nobody is assigned to it. It requires a willful turning away from God and persistence in that to the very end. The chief punishment on this teaching is that separation itself, not fire as a physical torture device. The traditional imagery is imagery. And the church has never defined the flames as literal. So the picture of a God eager to punish, looking for reasons to condemn, isn't a Catholic picture. The teaching is closer to this. Love cannot be forced. And a God who forced everyone into union with him regardless of their will wouldn't be respecting persons at all. This is the part that surprises people the most, including a lot of Catholics. For a sin to be mortal, 3 conditions all have to be met. The matter has to be grave. The person has to have full knowledge that it is gravely wrong, and they have to give complete and deliberate consent. All 3, not one of them, diminished knowledge, coercion, or fear, habit, physical factors, and immaturity can all reduce or even remove the culprit. The church says this directly. There's more. The Second Vatican Council taught that those who through no fault of their own do not know Christ or his church, but who seek God with a sincere heart and try to do his will as they understand it, may obtain salvation. That's not a modern liberal invention. It's a council document. And here's a fact worth sitting with. The church has formally declared many specific people to be in heaven. That's what canonization is. It has never declared a single person to be in hell. Not one. Not even Judas. So go back to the objection. Infinite punishment for finite crimes. The response turns on how you understand what's happening. If hell were a sentence, a fixed term imposed as retribution, the proportion objection would land a little bit harder. So, But on the church's account, hell isn't a duration of punishment for a past act. It's a state. It's what remains when a person has definitely refused the only thing that could fulfill them. It's permanent, not because the sentence is long, but because the refusal is final. An analogy would be imperfect like all of them, but someone who permanently serves a relationship isn't being punished for the length of that estrangement. The estrangement is just what follows from the choice, and it lasts for as long as the choice stands. That reframes the question. It's no longer why God punishes so severely. It's whether a creature can make a final, settled refusal of God, knowing, who he actually is. And that's a genuinely harder question to answer in either direction. So here's where I have to be straight with you because it doesn't resolve cleanly. Scripture says God desires all to be saved. Scripture also contains a sobering warning from Jesus himself about final loss, and he gives them frequently. Holding both of those together is not comfortable, and Christians have argued about it for 2,000 years without settling it. There's a live debate about whether we may hope that all are ultimately saved. Some serious Catholic theologians have argued we may hope for it while never pursuing it. Others argue that position takes that warnings too lightly. The church permits the discussion and has not closed it. What the church does hold firmly is that hell is real, that it's possible, and that no one can know the final state of any particular soul, including their own. So anyone who tells you confidently how many people are in hell is going past what the church teaches in both directions. The person certain that most are lost and the person certain that none are lost are both claiming knowledge nobody has. I said I'd come back to this, so here it is. Some of you are watching this not as a physiological question, but because you're genuinely afraid. Maybe you were taught a version of this that stayed with you for years. Notice what the teaching in section 3 actually implies. Mortal sin requires full knowledge and complete deliberate consent. The kind of anxious, scrupulous fear that asks, what if I've already done something unforgivable? Is not the profile of a person in definite refusal of God. It's much closer to the opposite. Someone in a final, settled rejection of God isn't worried about that. The church's constant teaching is that no sin is beyond God's mercy for anyone who turns back. That's not a loophole. It's the center of a thing. And this fear is something you carry heavily. If you do, talk to a priest. And if it's affecting your daily life, talk to a doctor or a counselor. Religious is crazy. It is real. And it's a treatable condition. And no one should try to think their way out of it alone. If this clarified a teaching you'd only ever heard, confusing, in either direction, hit like and subscribe. And if you're good with me screwing up my words from time to time, because speaking is hard, give me a double like. I don't know if you could do that. But I'm Jonathan Roberts. I appreciate you watching. And next time, we're going to be jumping into an objection that Christianity is simply outdated, that the church is behind times and holds positions that modern world has moved past. So that's going to be a fun one. So hope to see you on the next video.